She's a little ways down.
Well, we can do it next month meeting. Tiny little more.
Regards. Yeah.
Okay, Dan.
Right, stand for the pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic that stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I got ahead of moving.
There's no comment.
So each time we have an opportunity for you to topic on the floor that's not on the agenda, limited to 5 minutes. If you have something you can. What's the point?
My name is Brady Brand, and I'm concerned about the planning commission and that you have two people on the planning commission that have documented lies in public. And I think it puts a cloud over the commission. And while one of them may have a reason, not that I agree with it, the other person had no reason to lie. You could have told the truth. Everybody knows that you don't live there. And I think it's a cloud on this commission to have people that are documented liars. And it puts a cloud against everybody that's new. And I think you can take action on it. The other comment that I have is talk about the proactive items that you have on here. You had architectural planners in forever, you don't ever get to it or do anything about it. I think a more important proactive item that you have is to talk about the plaza. Plaza's a mess. And I think the commission is the one that probably needs to address that. And it's gonna be a mess until you decide to do something about it. And clearly you'll have to have the city council's approval, but we need to do brick. Or we need to do turf, astroturf or something, but it's gonna be a mess. As long as we have Halloween time, you cannot have thousands of people here on the grass and have it not be a mud bath. And I would really like to see this commission do something and take some action to proactively plan to upgrade the plaza.
Anyone else? I know there's someone on Zoom that wants to, but you both in the room. All right. Who's on Zoom? Gosh.
I'm trying to get my video on so I can have a video so you can see me.
Sorry, I'm not seeing it as an option, Steve. We're trying to be a little bit more careful after our last Zoom scare with council, so we may have to do this without video.
All right, well, thank you very much. I'm Steve Toski, and I'm a citizen of St. Helens. I'm sorry I did not come this evening to address the Planning Commission personally. I'm out of town for family reasons, my father's 90th birthday being among them. But I did think it was important for me to welcome one of our new planning commissioners and to discuss some important things about the Planning Commission and the role of the Planning Commission within our city. I want to make sure that it's clear that the sun rises and falls every day in St. Helens with a gag order, which is designed to prevent this commission from performing its lawful duties under the law. And I think the two attorneys on the commission can explain what the effects are of gag provisions like the one that was enacted by the city of St. Helens, which caused me to resign from the chair of the commission, in part in protest of this, but also because I did not want to be perceived to be a part of a government that was unconstitutionally limiting speech. But one of the problems with the free speech suppression rule is the chilling effect on speech. And I see that chilling effect on speech with this commission in that it's no longer moving forward with its proactive items. And I think a lot of that comes from discouragement by the commission that the city council really does not want to have the planning commission involved in its decisions, which is unlawful. And also that the fact of retaliation against members of the planning commission if they should be trying to move forward with our city. What I see as a big problem in this fiasco with the police station, and I thank you very much for your courage in making the correct decision in denying the conditional use application. I've thoroughly studied that, and there are a lot of things that I found out after the planning commission hearing that I want to share. That this was an effort that was led by out-of-town people. It was led by a firm hired out of Portland that led the discussion. And a lot of things were not discussed along the way. Like, for example, why are we investing $12.5 million of public money to fund a police station on the other side of town, when instead what we could be doing is cleaning up the Holton Business District and knocking down the police station, which the police say is a useless building. Nobody even wants to go in it. It's unsafe. It's beyond its useful life. So what the city did was essentially try to move forward with a plan that satisfied a lot of people's ego, which was to create this station on Old Portland Road, and ignored the economic needs of our citizens, and ignored the betterment of our city as a whole. It would have been a much better plan to tear down the old station and to tear down the building next to it, and then redevelop that area into a brand new facility and continue to move forward with revitalization of our areas in town that we are trying to boost. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about is, first of all, I want to say that this is going to change. We have political change that is going to happen in our city in 2024. The people that are currently running the city in this oppressive and tyrannical way are going to be removed from the government. And also, I don't really want to sue the city, but if I have to, I will, to remove this gag law. But I'm encouraging the commission to move forward bravely with moving forward with planning. And our focus should be on economic betterment of our city. We need to be moving forward with it. And we need to be looking out, because our city is being planned by people that do not live here. So thank you.
Thank you. Else? Right. Next item. Planning Commission minutes from September 12th. So, do you have any comments, any updates, corrections? Motion to accept.
To accept draft minutes as written.
Seconded.
All in favor? I would hear.
We go here.
Aye.
Can you do that with?
Commissioner Shoemaker?
Jennifer?
Jennifer?
How do you vote?
I vote aye. I wasn't letting me unmute.
Okay,
Just making sure.
thank you. It is now 6:09 p.m. The public hearing is now open. This is a quasi judicial land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request for a conditional use permit. The subject property is identified in the county assessor's map as lot 1401 on map 4N1W8AE. The applicant is Lower Columbia Engineering, Amana Center. The owner is the Dahlgren Trust. Because quasi judicial proceedings require the observance of certain procedural formalities, we'll take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare potential or actual conflict of interest or bias in this matter?
No.
Think none. Any member Oh, it's a little different now, okay.
News script.
Does any member of the commission wish to declare any as part of the communications or site visits? You know, my previous job that there was a delineation done out there. I wasn't part of it. You know. It was concurred with. Anyone from the audience object to the ability of a commissioner to make a fair decision?
Yes.
Okay. We're gonna have to point out a particular commissioner that you don't.
Commissioner Kasner and Commissioner Rosengard, for the reasons I stated earlier, that they have documented lies on the public record. And I don't think that they should be making this decision.
Okay, you commissioners. Have an opportunity to respond if you want to. The commissioners mentioned.
I think the complainant fundamentally misunderstands the way that documents in question work and legal definition of terms.
The particular books that you mentioned, do you have any?
My turn. I disagree that in the documented liar, there is a current lawsuit pending that's still pending that you have filed. There was nothing documented, and I've been an officer of the court, and it's basically slanderous to even say that.
Are you gonna participate?
Yes.
Okay.
So. We need to make sure. That all other commissioners, concur with the continued participation. I'm sorry if I feel like I'm stepping
Yeah,
on.
it's getting ready to go. Did any commissioner not concur with the commissioner's decision regarding participation? No. So we don't need to challenge it by, I want to deal with that. Okay, generally the order of proceedings will be as follows. Required statements, staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, final questions, close of the record, deliberations, and decision. The following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to the city code in ORS 197.17975. The following is a list of the applicable substantive criteria for this decision. City of St. Helens Municipal Code 17.100.04018F. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria as described, or any other criteria in the comprehensive plan or land use regulation which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval in this hearing, in person or in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements of evidence or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue, precludes appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue, and precludes an action for damage to the circuit court. All right, staff report.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So tonight, as Chair Carey mentioned, we're looking at a conditional use permit. The applicant is Lower Columbia Engineering, representing the Amani Center. And I'm not going to talk too much about the Amani Center and what they do, because I'm sure they will in their presentation. For our purposes, they're an office, they're office use. And our subject property is located at the corner, the intersection of McNulty Way, which is here, and Industrial Way, which is kind of a dead end street that can't quite see the intersection, but this is kind of the corner lot there. So we're just south of Gable Road. And our subject property is kind of sandwiched in between these other two lots. So in 2008, there was a 3-parcel partition. So Lower Columbia Engineering is located here on parcel 1 in that partition. Parcel 2, which is our subject property, is located here. And it's got kind of this arm that extends out to Industrial Way. And then parcel 3 of that partition in 2008 is located down here. And that's developed with a multi-tenant industrial complex. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So, the Amani Center wants to build an 8,329 square foot office building here on this vacant parcel. It's a 2-story proposal. And there's a couple of things going on this property. There's a public utility easement that kind of runs the length of this arm and then heads up north and then heads this direction. There's a public utility, a public storm system. It's basically a big pit that retains stormwater on the site. And we'll look at that in detail a little bit later, but it's kind of along this northern property line here. And then that extends out to the creek. So the utility easement goes this direction. The good news for the Amani Center, this public frontage is already complete. So there's a developed driveway approach already that the property on the corner here, you may have driven by and seen there's an industrial building called Control Solutions. They do manufacturing there. They utilize this existing driveway approach and actually built that driveway approach for their facility. But it is actually part of the subject property for tonight. It's just shared with that development on the corner. So no frontage improvements required of the Amani Center. It's fully developed. So office use, this property is zoned light industrial, as is the surrounding properties that I mentioned in that partition plat. Office use is a conditionally allowed use in industrial only under the classification as an industrial park. So when parcel 1 was developed with an office use and parcel 3 was developed, there was an instrument recorded on the deed that said parcels 1, 2, and 3 are all subject to this industrial park classification. And what that means is more than 30% of the uses on these 3 parcels, if you're utilizing the industrial park classification, must be permitted outright uses in the light industrial zone. And that's to avoid, all offices taking up our light industrial zoning. Light industrial is intended for light industrial uses. And so that's important because we have Lower Columbia as an office use, and we have the Amani Center, which is an office use. So that's 2 of those 2 parcels. So what do we do? So we took this parcel 3, the multi-tenant suite, and we had the owner and Lower Columbia prepare an exhibit that showed each suite and their business use. And so we concluded a majority of the multi-tenant suite was occupied by permitted industrial uses, so that's great. And it actually, the math turned out that over 66% of all of the businesses, including Lower Columbia, the proposal, and all the multi-tenant suites, are permitted outright uses in the light industrial zone. So that whole use, it's kind of a complicated web, but it's the way that the Amani Center can use this property for what they want. And it turns out it works in and is code compliant. So hopefully that makes sense. So sensitive lands.
Question.
Sure.
I thought the pieces were, show me 1, 2, 3 on the 3 people on the deed.
Yeah, so parcel 1
Yeah.
is right here.
Yeah.
Parcel 2 is this arm, and then this one right here, and then parcel 3 is here.
Okay, I thought it was the other corner. Up there.
The Control Solutions one?
Yeah, I thought it was there, and so I was like, what is that other one related to?
Oh, I see. Yeah, no, this
With
one's
that.
not under that
Okay,
industrial
I
zone.
thought I misheard it, and I was like.
Yeah.
I was just making sure I understood where we were going forward.
Yeah, I feel like we performed some zoning gymnastics to get the Amani Center's use to be able
Right,
to.
so I was just making sure I understood the
Yeah.
thought process.
Yeah. So sensitive lands, I'm gonna kind of go through, the staff report details a lot of general stuff that we always look at. I'm just gonna highlight, I'm gonna do the quick highlight of stuff, like we always do. So sensitive lands, we know McNulty Creek runs along here. It's really hard to see, and I apologize for that. But this is the 100-foot distance from the top of bank. And then this is the development footprint. It's well away from McNulty Creek. And so we know we don't need a sensitive lands permit for that. Steep slopes, you can kind of see the topo starts to get a little steep around here. For the most part, the development footprint seems to be avoiding those steep slopes, but with plan revisions, we just want to make sure we're not getting into that steep slope area. If we are, then we may need a sensitive lands permit. And then also floodplain, you know, for the same reason as before, the elevation doesn't start to get lower, you know, just for an example, this is 40-foot elevation, this is all the way up at 60. So there's a significant drop as you get closer to the creek, but the footprint is well outside of that lower elevation. So no sensitive lands permit is anticipated. There is a condition in there that if the plans change so much so that we, you know, are into that area, that we can require one later. So parking, we always talk about parking. The code for a 8,300 square foot office building only actually requires 24 spaces. And they're providing 36. So it's a little bit difficult to see, but they have parallel parking. I'll go to the parking plan here. They have parallel parking proposed along this driveway here. And then they've kind of got two wings of parking. These are all marked as compact. And then they've got their ADA spaces. So they're actually showing a surplus of more than 12 parking spaces. So we have a condition in there that, you know, if the Amani Center ends up downsizing slightly and wants to reduce the parking just to save money, they can without coming to you guys again. We're just saying you need to provide the minimum. And if things change and you want to downsize, that all is well, you're already over what you're needing. So bike parking. Bike parking is typically a percentage of off-street parking requirements. So in this case, normally you would require 10% of what you're requiring for vehicle spaces. So since they're over parking, they're providing more parking, there's a question in there for the commission of how many bike parking spaces do you guys want to see? They're showing one rack, which can only support 2. So if they're providing 36 spaces, as they've shown, they would typically need to provide 4, which would be at least 2 racks. The other question about bike parking is typically we like to see it covered when it's possible. Usually if we're just providing 2 spaces, it's not enough to trigger the need for covering the bike parking. But if you're going to do more than 2 spaces, we would normally want to see that covered. You know, this is a conditional use permit, so the commission can decide, you know, how many spaces they should provide and whether or not it should be covered. And maybe they can provide some testimony tonight that would help you decide on that. I'll just point it out since it's worth mentioning. They showed the bike parking rack right here, which is close enough to the entrance. That's where we like to see it. The paved pad is not large enough for a bike. So however many spaces we want to make sure it can support the average size bike. Right. So moving on to illumination. So this is their proposed
Question about bike parking.
Sure, yeah.
So is that 10% figure 10% of the minimum car parking or 10% of the actual car parking?
Yeah, so that's the question for the commission.
Gotcha.
So I'm asking, do you guys want me to interpret as 10% of the minimum required or 10% of what they're showing they're putting? The code's kind of not clear. Hopefully that answers stuff. Yeah.
It also says that they're saying they are going to provide 4.
No. You say 4?
So the applicant states that they are providing a total of 4 parking spaces.
Yeah, so in their narrative they do, but the plans don't match that.
Okay.
So it's just a question for you guys. How many do you want to require in their plan revisions? Yeah, and do you want to be covered? Good question. So in their illumination plan, they're showing 2 pole mounted for their parking lot lighting, the one here and one here, and then they're showing some wall mounted packs on the building. We need to see a couple revisions. So one is we want to see illumination for all walkways. And so the back of the building, they should just add some wall mounted lighting back there. This is also a good point to point out that there's a door here and there's no walkway to it, so we'll wanna see a walkway extending to the door on that north side of the building, as well as lighting. Our city engineer reviewed this proposal and said, we don't wanna see a pole mounted light right in the middle of our storm utility easement. Makes sense, so this pole mounted light will need to be moved outside of that public utility easement, that's kind of built into the conditions. Our code also talks about requiring walkways from all entrances to the streets that provide them access. And so they're showing a walkway that extends off the property and onto private property to McNulty Way. And we think that's a good solution. That's probably where people are gonna be wanting to walk anyway, rather than taking kind of a roundabout way along Industrial Way. Although there is sidewalk along Industrial Way. They would obviously need to show that they have an access easement through that private property as part of their approval process. But in terms of lighting, we also require that walkways are illuminated, so that's also missing from this illumination plan.
I thought I saw on the plans that that walkway is not lined up with the utility easement.
If I have an image of that.
It's without.
Yeah, so the utility easement's here. And one of the conditions of approval is that they'll need a private access easement to show a pedestrian walkway through this property. It's not supposed to line up with the utility easement.
Yeah, maybe it would be better if it did, but already an easement.
Yeah, I mean, typically, if you can avoid having damaged sidewalks as part of utility construction, we'd want to avoid it. But there are surfaces shown a little bit here, and city engineering reviewed that and thought that the encroachments with some of their flat work is okay. Yeah, that's not their removal. Okay. So revised illumination plan needs to illuminate the back of the building, walkway here, also needs to illuminate any potential walkway that gets to McNulty Way. And then we need to see this fixture moved out of the utility easement here. So it's pretty rare, I was talking to Jacob about this, that you have a commercial property that needs a fire turnaround. Typically, you don't have this long arm of a driveway, but we actually have a driveway that's longer than 150 feet, which requires a fire turnaround for fire apparatus. And they've shown, let's see if I have the diagram. Yes, it's just hard to see on this. It's really red. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. Yeah, so it's just very dim, but you can see that they've shown a Y fire turnaround within their parking lot circulation. Jacob noted that this radius isn't quite what the fire turnaround should look like. It's a little bit too much of a right angle right here. It looks like there's room for the correct radius, but it should be represented appropriately. And we always have a condition that all requirements of the fire marshal have to be met as part of the proposal, but that's just something we want to make sure will fit. Tree preservation. So this property is pretty forested, but most of the trees are along the creek and outside of the development footprint. But anytime there's more than 10 trees of a certain size, we can actually require a full tree plan of the property. We want it to be nice to the Amani Center, so we just said, well, your footprint's well outside of most of the trees. They anticipate only 2 trees potentially impacted, but we still want to make sure we have a tree plan that shows all trees of a certain size within 20 feet of the development proposal, and that way we can make sure any trees that are close to the development can retain, be protected, and that any trees that are removed with their size so that we can require a replanting plan. So that's a condition that's built in. It's basically a tree plan, but reduced, a mini tree plan. So that's that. So utilities. Water's easy. Water's just on Industrial Way. Sewer is also on Industrial Way. This property is located within a basin that has deficient sewer conveyance. And so there is a sewer impact fee that's built into the conditions of approval. It's one of the lower impact fees, so I feel pretty decent about that. It's $3,200 per equivalent dwelling unit, so it'll be based on their water meter size, since this is not dwelling units. For storm, they're gonna utilize this existing, very close and convenient public storm retention area, so they'll just connect into that. They have to make our city engineering department happy with that. Traffic, so they provided a traffic memo that stated this development is not large enough to require a full traffic impact analysis. And that is all I have. Any questions for me?
I want to correct what I said earlier, that there was a delineation on this 30 years ago as involved with, that found not be there. I'll see you in the next hearing.
Okay.
Okay. Applicant, have a presentation.
Hello, I'm Matt Alexander with Lower Columbia Engineering. I'll be pretty brief because I think Jenny gave a pretty comprehensive overview of what's going on, and I've got an army of supporters from Amani here to explain more about what they do. Plus, public speaking is my nightmare. So this right here is the current Amani Center building. It's located right on Columbia Boulevard, right in the midst of probably one of the busier, more urban sections of St. Helens, which I'll explain later. That's a bit of a problem for what they do. Just to give you a quick overview, the Amani Center is a nonprofit. They basically children who are suspected to have been abused, whether sexually, physically, neglected, whatever. They provide medical and forensic exams and support services for those children and their families. And I'll let them speak more on what exactly they do and how important it is. I'll just say that it's a very, very vital service they provide this community. They're, I believe, the only ones in this community who provide the service. And given the size and population of Columbia County, they've outgrown this space. This space was previously, I don't know what it was, but it wasn't built for their needs. They had to go in and utilize it however they could. Yeah, so this is where it is. You know, Red Apple's right down the street. St. Helens Street's a couple blocks up. It's right in the middle of downtown, basically. This is where they're proposing to move to. That building we just looked at is 3,000 square feet. And they need about 2.5 times that for what they need to provide the community so that they can serve more than one family at once. This property, as a nonprofit, you know, we'd love to put this somewhere where we didn't need a conditional use permit, right? But money is not something they have a lot of. They get most of their money from grants and donors and a little bit of state funding. So the Dahlgrens, Eric and Christine Dahlgren, who have been supporting the Amani Center for quite some time, just happen to have this property. They'd already developed 2 of the other properties, and Christine offered, when Beth Polito, who's with Amani Center, asked if they had anything, they offered this property to donate. And it's perfect for the Amani Center because what they're looking to provide is trauma-informed design. They'll talk more about that, but from what I know, the sensitive nature of what they do requires privacy and a feeling of security and safety. You know, really privacy, I think, is the major problem with their current spot. I mean, anybody who parks out on Columbia Boulevard is gonna see your car. There's not really anywhere to hide. This spot, as Jenny said, is, you know, it's a kind of a flag lot. And the other part of trauma-informed design is providing a space that reduces the amount of environmental stimuli and stresses, so noises, people, other people that are distressed, for instance. And this, I think this property does that. And it also provides the kind of natural environment that is best for trauma-informed design. The creek's right there. The property's a little bit difficult in terms of grades. But Jenny, you can go ahead and go to the proposed site plan. Most of the steep grades and the forested areas, vegetation is on that eastern part around the riparian area of Nolte Creek. So we're keeping pretty much everything to the far west as we could. We had it even a little further, but we didn't. We got asked to move out of the utility easement. So we're taking up as much of it as we can. But with this design, even the parking lots provide an additional kind of, the parking lots and the required screening around them provide another level of privacy for this building. And then the building itself is oriented towards the creek. As many views as we can get down towards that riparian area. I think Jenny covered all the utilities are there. You know, minus having to pay a little sanitary fee. We've got room for more parking than is required, but I've been told by the client that they need as much parking as they can get. So, you know, they may grow into it if they don't need it now. Just talking to them now, the bike parking is not an issue. We'll add 4 spots and make it big enough if we need to. We did discuss with them the need for the off-street pedestrian walkway to get them to the right of way. Christine owns this property down here that has all the state police and the industrial uses. They already have a sidewalk that leads to the public right of way. So I just wanted to posit that if it was possible to connect to that, if it's already lit as well. And then
like through this where I'm pointing right now.
yeah. So yeah.
Cut over like that.
Cut over like that. So we changed where the crosswalk was in our parking lot, come down to that. We'd only have to light that little 40-foot stretch between the parking lot and state police. And then we may have to improve. I think it's improved all along Industrial Way, but if not, we could improve up until that first curb ramp and add sidewalk along there. It'd be a lot less concrete for them to have to install. Other than that, we're adding a lot of screening. The grading work's gonna be pretty minimal, I think. We're trying to stay away from those steep slopes, but if a sensitive lands permit is required, we're certainly willing to take care of that. Illumination, once again, hopefully we can, the illumination on the east side of the building was just an oversight. Of course, we're gonna have, we may end up having some sort of roof structure there. So that was part of the reason we didn't show wall mounted lighting. So we may have something that's actually under a canopy. You can go. And regarding the plans, I'm gonna let the Amani people talk a bit more about the structure of what they do and the order. But the building itself, we think will fit in nicely with the new Control Solutions building and the Lower Columbia Engineering building. Lower Columbia Engineering also has the cedar siding. This will just have regular asphalt shingle roof, concrete base, obviously a lot of glazing. 2-story lobby, so it'll be a nice entrance. I think that's about it.
Question.
Yeah.
And show that that building coming out on the east side, there's a further expansion.
Okay, so that has kind of evolved. Originally, that area was going to be tenant space. So that Christine or the Amani Center could rent that out and get extra profit from some sort of tenants on the first and second floor. Since then, it's been decided, because this is design review and it's more about the outside and location of the building than it is about the floor plan. We're probably gonna end up filling that space with more office space for the Amani. Not gonna go away, it'll still, the footprint of the building will be the same, but on the inside, that big blank space we're showing will not be a big blank space.
The building we're looking at is the whole L shaped.
Yeah, so nothing will change from this view, it's just in the floor plan. It'll have more walls, doors, things that are in buildings.
And you might have a roof extend out beyond the existing L shape,
No, so we're showing in the elevations, we're showing the full,
the potential extended roof.
yeah.
I have a question. So you're talking about using the industrial way property as your path to connect to the street. I know there's no frontage improvements along that property.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, is we'd finish them up to that curb ramp that was done for control.
So it would be the public sidewalk, not a sidewalk on the private side.
Well, we build the private side to connect with the sidewalk that's already on that industrial property. That sidewalk does not have a connection, there's no sidewalk in front of. Okay, we build that, whatever it is, 30-40 feet of public sidewalk.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that's clear, because that could change
Yeah.
the decision.
And that's still, I mean, it's still like lengthwise less than we went all the way across and split up that industrial property, so.
The additional sidewalk will be on the industrial way.
Yeah, so. Instead of coming all the way up there and splitting this awkwardly into two. We come down here, connect to this sidewalk, and then we. Curb ramps and sidewalk will put in on this side, and only a curb ramp is put in on this side, so. If that is still the case, we would put sidewalk in along here just to connect with this.
And this area would have to be illuminated, just like we had
Yes,
proposed. You know, walkways need to be illuminated.
Yeah. but this is already all illuminated, so it would also lessen the amount of lighting.
Any questions?
Jennifer, you should be able to unmute. You have a question?
Okay, I do. It's regarding the staff report on page 3. It talks about at the bottom, the islands. The plan reflects them at 6 feet wide without curbs but curbs are required. I'm confused on that part. Need some clarification there.
Yeah, Jacob may chime in, but the code has a measurement to make sure that the landscaping area can support the landscaping that it's trying to grow. And so there's a measurement without curbs just to make sure the planting area is big enough. But yes, curbs are required and proposed.
Okay, because it said, I thought that they were shown without curbs, so that's why I was asking. So, okay, great, thanks.
But sometimes a designer will measure the 6 feet from the outside of the curb. Rather than the inside of the curb.
Okay.
Sorry if that's confusing in there, Jennifer, thank you.
No problem. That's all I had.
Any other questions to ask of the applicant? Okay, thank you. You have additional applicant. Right?
Yeah, People Pro, you mean?
Well, are they part of the
The
applicant?
difference will be if they're on a 5-minute timer or not. So if the Amani Center has one person that can just speak unlimited, that would be that person to come up.
Who wants to speak on that?
Yeah.
Maybe I can go sit down.
No, I'm kidding.
A couple people, if you split your time.
It's okay, and I'll try to be brief too. I really appreciate your guys' time this evening. My name is Amelia Kircher. I'm the executive director for the Amani Center. As you heard, we are a child abuse assessment center. We've been serving Columbia County and City of St. Helens for over 20 years. We provide services to child victims of crime and their families. So when the worst things imaginable happen in the lives of a child or a family, we're the soft spot that they can come and land and get the services that they need. We provide medical exams. So in cases where there's physical injuries, we're able to provide those required exams that meet the state statute for Carly's Law. We also are able to provide support to the families while those kids are getting those exams. Often the family is, being disrupted and they need supports and services. And we have victim advocates, staff that work with the families to make sure that they have a safe and stable place for children to heal in after these events. We have trained forensic interviewers. So what that means is that prior to centers like ours existing in the country, it wasn't great for kids. You would have a police officer show up at your house and that patrol officer would interview you about the crime. In Columbia County, if there was a medical need, they would have to travel all the way to the hospitals in Portland, and you're sitting in an emergency room, and that can be hours long to get that service. That also takes our officers and our child welfare workers outside of the community because they also have to travel to the hospital and spend hours there at the hospital. And so a consortium of community members came together and founded the Imani Center, and we've been providing that service ever since. But those kids would have that contact with law enforcement. They'd have to go, they'd have to tell their story at the hospital. A detective would have to respond. They'd have to tell the story again. They then have to go and talk at grand jury. And our services help to minimize that. So kids only have to tell their story one time. They come to our center, which Matt was explaining. We really put a lot of effort into making sure that our space is as trauma informed and comfortable for kids as possible. And they get interviewed by a specialist. Our forensic interviewers are trained in child growth and development. They are trained in interviewing techniques, and there's just a ton of science that goes behind that. And so they get to sit in a nice, comfortable room with a kind person who's interviewing them versus being interviewed out in the field by a patrol officer who's fully suited up with, sidearm. And that is intimidating for kids. And often having to travel to Portland was such a barrier that families just wouldn't pursue justice. And so our services contribute to our community safety. We partner very, very closely with our St. Helens Police Department and all of our law enforcement jurisdictions in the county. But we just did analysis a few months ago, and our St. Helens Police Department is our strongest partner in terms of referrals and the support that they provide to the families that we see. While we are meeting with the families at the center and the parents are getting support, the child is getting their examination, there's also a whole bunch of things that happen in the background. And Shawnee is our multidisciplinary team coordinator. She'll come and tell you guys a little bit about what she does to help coordinate the county's response to these cases and make sure that all the agencies involved have the information that they need. We have our law enforcement and our child welfare partners in an observation room while we're doing the interview. And that is a room that's separate from the child and the family, so they don't ever have to interact with those individuals if they don't want to. Some of our kids absolutely love the law enforcement officers, and so they want to see them, but otherwise they don't have to. And then we also can provide them with kind of a calm space to interact with each other and share case information. We have snacks and coffee for them. And make sure that they're well taken care of when they're at our center. When you're looking at the building plans, we currently are only able to see one family at a time. And our building is not easily designed for us. Our family room, the space that we have for families to sit in, is the only room that connects the two halves of the building. So on days when we have families there, rain, sun, shine, snow, we are running around the outside of the building to make sure that that we're able to get our family and my team the support that they need to provide the service. This building plan gives us a lobby. Right now, we have a tiny little vestibule, so if we have a family show up when we are in an assessment with another family, we don't really have a comfortable place for them to be right now. This allows for a really nice lobby area and then also gives us the capacity to serve 2 families at a time. And those families would also have access to that back patio, that outdoor green space. So we're really increasing the level of comfort that they'd have while in this assessment. Right now, it's just Columbia Boulevard that we have access to. We are also working on expanding our services. We have seen a continuous increase in the need for services over the years. We had a little dip during COVID when kids weren't having contact with mandatory reporters. But those numbers are increasing back up to the pre-pandemic levels at this point. We also recognize that there's an incredible need for therapy services in the community that are specialized for children who've experienced this kind of trauma. So we've been working with Columbia Pacific CCO and Columbia Community Mental Health, and we will be adding a therapy program next year. Hopefully in the next few months, we'll be able to launch that. But right now, in order to launch that program, Beth, my deputy director, and I will likely be moving into the storage room with no windows, as giving up my office is the only room that is in our current building that can function for therapy. This building plan, you see that kind of empty wing that would become our proposed therapy wing on the bottom floor so that families can come in and just directly go back to therapy services. And it would give us more than one room to conduct therapy in. So we'd be able to see many more kids to provide that service. And make sure that we're really able to be there from the first moment that an incident happens all the way through that path to healing, so that you have kids that are thriving, that grow into adults that are thriving and contributing to this community. I could ramble for a long time, but please, do you guys have any questions for me about the center, what we do?
I missed it, but did you serve, what area? You serve all of Columbia County, broader than that, or?
Columbia County is our jurisdiction. We do provide services occasionally to kids from outside of the county for various reasons. Right now, we're covering Clatsop County because they had a tree fall on their CAC's roof and water damage to the building. And so, we are part of a statewide network and we all support each other when there's things like that. If there's a conflict of interest, we're all in small communities around the state. And so there are times where there are conflicts of interest. And so they might refer a child to us. We also see kids, if the incident of crime occurred somewhere else, but they're placed with a relative out here, we'll see those cases as a courtesy, as long as the law enforcement from that jurisdiction approves, so that it's not a burden on the child and family to travel back to like Roseburg to have their assessment occur. So we do what's best for the children and families that are in our community.
Questions?
Very familiar with the ones.
Thank you so much.
You wanted to bring your other staff member up?
Sure. Shawnee, do you want to talk about what our multidisciplinary team does?
I would love to.
Yay.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Shawnee Moreland. I am the multidisciplinary program manager. So my job is to coordinate and network with all of the organizations in Columbia County that serve these children from their organization's perspective. And I coordinate all of them to meet weekly to get on the same page on the cases so that the kids aren't falling through the cracks and there's nothing missed and we're all on that same page and moving forward. So this space, a new space for Amani Center, would do wonders for the MDT. It would give us a designated confidential space to meet in weekly. sometimes our meetings go 2 hours, that's how many cases we have. We're lucky in Columbia County here to be able to staff every single case that comes to me, to our MDT. So sometimes those meetings are short, sometimes they're long. But this would give that space to have that meeting for any length of time that we needed. It also will allow for those MDT members to coordinate and chat and network before and after the meetings. It also provides us a space for training. So when we do hold meetings, trainings in person that aren't virtual, because we're shifting back, we will have that space to gather everybody in. Currently in our current space, it's a shared space. So we have that time for our allotted MDT time. But we are cognizant that that space needs to be used after that allotted.
There are 3 desks in that conference space in our current facility.
One of them's mine.
And if it's the second floor that the planned space is, but we've actually got retracting walls between the break room and the conference room to allow for larger space. It's one of the reasons too why additional parking is helpful, because while the team is not, you know, a large amount of people, we want to make sure that there's enough parking that we can still provide client services while we have our community partners there to collaborate on cases to keep kids safe. Yeah, anything else?
One question, I don't think this would implicate the level of detail you're describing things at, but I'm curious, in your planning for the building, whether you're planning to make it accessible for smoking.
Yes, so we have in the past had a facility dog that we shared with the county courthouse and their victims assistance program, but when COVID hit, we couldn't share, and now she's retirement age. So we do have staff that have an application in to have a facility dog in the facility, but there's plenty of access points to green space for any assistance dogs. We also, you know, want to be ahead of the game on ADA compliance, and so we're putting a lot of effort into making sure that everything is accessible and comfortable in the facility, including the elevator, and that ends up being a little bit of a challenging prospect. It was Matt put a lot of effort into sorting out where the elevator goes, because in our interview rooms, so we've got one interview room here, and our medical exam rooms, there's very sensitive recording equipment, microphones. And so we can't have the elevator anywhere near where that sound equipment is going to pick it up. And same with like flushing toilets, and you wouldn't want to put the family room right next to the interview room, because then you have the potential for overhearing. And so it's quite a puzzle putting together those plans. And we've already talked about making some adjustments now that we're taking over that back space there, but Matt's done a really great job of coming back and listening to us and putting the puzzle together to make sure that it's going to work best for our purposes and the families we serve. This, you can see here, this is that dividing wall that we can open so that we have a larger meeting space there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all for the applicant presentation.
Jenny, can I just, Beth had brought 2 letters of support from the chief of police of Scappoose and a board member.
Okay.
Can I give those to you after?
You
Or
have copies for all commissioners?
We can make them and send them.
Well, they would need the opportunity to read it before they make their decision.
could I just?
They can pass it around maybe, yeah.
Maybe get up and talk.
Yes.
Are you guys saturated yet?
I was gonna close, but I mean, we have two other community members. I have a board member here and Christine Dahlgren's here who donated the property. And I'm the deputy director. I was just gonna close with anything that anybody missed. I'm the cleanup crew.
Clean up.
Well, we could fit you in the next group, so I guess.
I guess the question is, how many families do you serve and how many staff do you have?
So we have 18 people on staff at the moment that.
The microphone,
Yeah.
you up a little bit better.
I just wondered the total staff count, because we were talking about parking spaces. And I recognize that when you have anybody that's ever watched TV knows that there's lots of people in those rooms, so that takes more cars even.
Yes.
So I was wondering, how many families do you serve on an average month or whatever time period? And then how much staff you have?
So I can tell you that our families to date is 230, which is higher than last year. Already that was 224 last year. We have 18 people on staff that are 11.75 FTE, and they are not always there at the same time. Some are hybrid, some are full-time. I have a couple staff that work primarily from home. So I would say on average, the people in the office are about 10 on a given day. You're talking about 1 to 2 families at a time that are coming in for services, depending on, right at the beginning of this, our capacity with staff is going to be able to serve 1 family at a time with that extra space for crisis entry or walk-ins, or somebody, maybe we have a Carly's Law or drug endangerment that just needs to come in for a drug test but doesn't need like the whole assessment service. So that would be what we would use that secondary space for right to begin with. But the capacity for duplicating our services is important kind of to future-proof ourselves as this community grows. We know that housing is growing in this community.
How are you different than CASA?
So CASA's court-appointed special advocate, and they are the folks that, so we would be before CASA, really.
I didn't know if you worked with CASA or.
I would say that we're in the same circles. We actually have a CASA on staff and another CASA who used to be a recruiter who's on our staff now. So we're very well informed of what they do. They are the ones who will help a child after us. If they're going through the court system and they're maybe in foster care, or they're in a home that maybe has safety planning that needs somebody there to advocate on behalf of the child. And they're the ones going to court with that child to advocate for them. We're the ones who are providing detectives and DHS the information for them to see if they need to move forward with prosecution. So we're not the same, but I would say that we work together. We have had CASAs come in with their kids. If their kids have had to come in for assessments and that's their safe adult, then they'll bring them in as the person that's sitting with them in the family room during the assessment.
I believe we'll call you back later if you need to clean up.
Okay, sounds good.
So, any other folks, you guys, already talked, in support of the application?
That would be me.
Wow.
Hello, my name is Marco Castaneda. I'm on the board here on the center. I'd like to talk to you a little about community support. I had the opportunity to actually spend some time with Beth going around and talking to some of our donors and other members of our community about what we're trying to do here and how we're trying to grow this for a growing community. And the support was it was immense. I mean, everybody seems to understand what the vision is and is really on board and really wants to see this come to fruition. I think this community knows that it's an unfortunate service that we provide, but it's a necessary service, and they really want to get behind that and be part of this project as it grows and develops into fruition.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other in support?
I'm Christine Dahlgren. I'm the one that owns the piece of property we're talking about. So I'm very familiar with the whole process. In addition to that, we've been strong supporters of Amani Center for years. This particular piece of property, most of you know who my husband was. He passed away a year ago. But just 6 months before he passed away, he had a conversation with me about wanting to develop this piece of property. did I know somebody who might want to be a client of ours, because we own the property next to it, all that commercial. 2 weeks later, Beth came up to me at a fundraising event and said, does Eric own that property? And I said, yeah, and he's talking about developing it. And she says, put me on the list. The Amani Center wants to move. We have been working with them for a year and a half, getting the plans to this point. I am 100% in favor of this. I think this will do so much for our community. It's kind of astounding. So if you have any questions, I know the property pretty intimately. Okay.
Thank you. You're in support of the application.
I do have one online that would like me to read a statement. This is the M. Furnace.
Maria Fenstermaker.
Thank you.
She's actually one of the letters that we gave you.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
You have her.
Okay, awesome. She did ask me to read this. It's quick. I would like to add my support for this application. This space is so vital to the Amani Center's success, and their success is important for the future of children served, and improving the future of these children served improves the future of our whole community.
You're in support online or you neutral testimony, either in favor or against?
Hi. Sabrina Moore, St. Helens, we own, my family and I, property that is to the east of this, we share a property corner. I'm neutral in, I do think it's a great site. It is a private site. I think it would serve their purpose as well. I think that with them wanting to keep the vegetation, it's kind of perfect. My issue with it is two things. First being that, my property is still in the county. As such, permitted uses on my property that are allowed is marijuana and psilocybin, however you say that, processing, growing, wholesaling, that kind of thing. Although I do not have that now, I want to protect my uses for the future, whether it is me or another property owner. And the zoning ordinance that we are under says that it cannot be within 1,000 feet of a sensitive use. I understand at this point, we're calling it an office building, but everybody knows that these things grow. We're dealing with CCMH right now. I would like there to be a statement or a condition in there that this conditional use will not affect the current or future permitted uses of the surrounding property. Meaning I can't get into a situation where this turns into a sensitive use and I lose 4 permitted uses off of my land. That's where my issue lies. 1,000 feet. We've got about 9.5 acres down there. 1,000 feet knocks out 90% of my 9.5 acres with the way it is laid out. So a change like that could make my land less valuable. My other issue, and it's more something that I think that they can deal with in how they build. They talk about there's not a disruptive amount of noise in the area. Right now, we run a construction company. We have heavy equipment. You got dump trucks with tailgates banging. You have diesel equipment firing up, the sound of tracks from dozers and excavators. It's not a constant. We're usually loading up and heading out, but the neighborhood's not always real quiet. We have an auto shop that runs another one of our buildings that is, you hear air tools. Sometimes you hear them beating on things. And then the topography of the land itself, and this happens mostly on the weekend, but right now it's duck hunting season. It funnels right up that creek. We're hearing gunshots every morning on a regular basis. Like I said, don't usually happen during the week, so if they don't operate during the week, probably won't bother them. But those are my issues with it. Like I said, I'm pretty neutral, but I am really worried that it could morph into something that loses use on my land, and I don't want to see that happen. So if you guys can put some language in there to where it won't cause me to lose permitted uses. I'm not talking about conditional uses on my land, these are permitted uses for my land. That's it. Any questions? No? Yeah.
Have a or against, so.
You know,
And their valid concerns.
That's okay. Any other opposition? Or neutral? Right, you can rebut if you like.
Oh, I don't have much to say. Do I have to come up here?
There, yeah.
Where?
That big X on the ceiling.
Okay.
Speak into the ceiling.
Regarding the zoning, I don't know enough about what you were describing very particularly, by the way. To argue for or against that, all I know is that the city is currently considering an office use, which would probably not trigger what you're talking about, but I totally understand the, you know, evolving nature of the code and the change. Regarding the noise, I don't know, I work at LCE, which is the adjacent property to the north, and Christine and I were just talking about this. I don't hear you guys'
that's good.
at all.
I'm not over there, so I don't know how far it travels.
We really don't hear you.
And just relative to where they are now, which is, you know, aside from Highway 30, is probably the busiest thoroughfare in the county, one of them. This is just like a quiet little suburban neighborhood in comparison. Other than that, haven't heard any duck hunters. So that's all I got. And regarding your question about accessibility, I think that's what you were asking, right?
I was specifically asking about accessibility for testimonial animals. there.
Oh, okay, okay.
I feel like I got the answer covered. Yeah.
Just ADA wise, it's gonna be fully accessible.
I assume, yeah, I think otherwise we'd have bigger problems. Thank you.
That's all I got.
So, do you as the applicant object to those suggestions?
Well, in terms of putting language in
As a
the,
condition or some other requirement?
well, I guess it depends on what that condition is. Does that condition affect what they can do with the Amani Center, or does it just prevent the Amani Center's use from affecting her?
Yes, that's what I want.
I don't mind it as long as the Amani Center can continue to operate as they've described today. We don't mind, I don't think, putting something in our notice of decision about, you know, having no problem with marijuana growing within 1,000 feet,
Yeah,
as long as it's not cocaine or something.
what I'm gathering is that it wouldn't be a deterrent to permitted uses on surrounding industrial land.
Yeah.
And then an acknowledgement of surrounding industrial land and shall not complain for those uses.
Yeah, I'd have to confer with the clients, but I don't think that would be.
Now's the time to confer, because the record will be closed.
Okay, do you have any problem with that? It won't affect our use. Yeah. That's fine.
Sabrina can sell her land to the marijuana people.
Oh, I thought you were the marijuana lady.
I just want to protect my uses.
Yeah.
Neighbor.
That's like the best public comment I've heard it.
Okay, that the rebuttal from the applicant?
That was the rebuttal.
Okay, so the cleanup lady did.
Oh.
Forgot, that's.
Oh, I get to go still?
Sorry if you need.
Wow. I gotta get close to the X over here. I actually wanted to thank Sabrina for letting us know about the noise. And that is something that we've been talking with Lower Columbia about building materials and making sure that obviously soundproofing matters on the inside of our building because of all the recording material or the recording we do. It will probably be something we'll need to consider on the outside of the building too, but I don't have anything opposed to what she brought up for her opposition. We just want to bring better services and more services to the kids in our community and throughout the county. So we hope that this is the place to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner, have any other final questions? So staff or? Or staff?
Question. If permitted uses already exist, why do we need to change anything with the on the applicant's submission in order to protect those? Would that not have to be done through a new hearing process if they were going to change permitted uses of that property?
I think they're concerned, so. Let's say. In our rules for a marijuana retail place. There's rules about the distance between those properties as well as the distance from other uses such as schools. So let's say the psilocybin thing, which is new, let's say. Right now, its use legal is pretty restrictive. But let's say it becomes just legal, you can just buy it at a retail store. And there's laws that come out that say, okay, if you want to have a psilocybin retail establishment, that's okay, but they need to be a certain distance from certain uses. And they could be uses that cater to children, including schools, daycares, and stuff like that. So that would be new legislation. And I think the concern being expressed, if there's a use established today that caters to children, and then this new use comes out that says it's not supposed to be within a certain distance, I think that's the concern. Just as things evolve. So the concern is future potential uses and the legislation that could pertain to that and how it may tie in with this kind of use.
I understand and I agree with your thoughts to protect your permitted uses. I'm just trying to understand the mechanism.
I guess I understood it a different way. I understood it like, if you've ever sold a house and people decide, well, you didn't tell me that the people behind us have 4-wheel drive or whatever, and now I'm gonna complain because there's something there. So Amani Center agrees to do this function and she sells her property to somebody that does a permitted use. They can't come back and say you can't do that because it's always been a permitted use.
Well, that's the other part of it.
Right.
There's the one protecting about circumstances of future legislation and uses allowed, but also the complaining of existing uses. And if you work in the county, you see that it's for homes in resource zones. You build a home in an exclusive farm or a forest use or a forest zone. And it's been a long time since I worked for a county, but a requirement you would see is, okay, you can build a home here. You need to file something that says I shall not complain about surrounding farm and forest practices. Because you are electing to build a home in this kind of area.
But the trees belong to me and I can cut them down if I want to.
So I could see how we could arrive at a decision that includes that kind of language. I don't know, if we as a body are not sure how we would necessarily put something in place that would override, for example, a state level statute that just says this is what it is going forward.
Especially an unknown statute,
Right.
it's evolving and
Yeah.
you can't predict 20 years down the road.
Yeah, so I think, yeah.
You could potentially put some, and there's this fine line between deliberation and credits. And Yeah, I guess,
We done?
are we done gaining facts?
Yes.
Thank you.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, well, it's not clear, but. All right. One more final questions. Hearing for no further questions from the commission and no further responses from staff, the public record is closed. This matter return to the table for deliberations and oral discussion. Remember that at this point, you can only talk about what's on the record. No new information.
Now we can go back to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, you could put a condition in there. And from the person's concern perspective, it's something. Now, is it bulletproof from all circumstances? Not necessarily.
That we can do that, we do that.
Yeah, we can't. Salem tells us to go pound sand. Salem does that, but we can make a strong statement we can.
So I think we can go through the conditions.
Yeah.
I think while we're on this, we should just add a condition if the commission wants to, that addresses that comment. I heard you kind of.
Yeah, there's two in there.
Okay, let's do those now and then we'll go through the rest. That way we don't have to restart this conversation about it.
Yeah, no, that's smart. Might as well be efficient. So. And I guess, you know, the first thing is, are you receptive to this? But the first one is that the use is not to be a deterrent or an inhibitant to permitted uses on surrounding industrial land. Now, surrounding is kind of vague. You could say adjacent industrial land. I think it would still achieve the purpose as testified. So not to be a deterrent or inhibitant to permitted uses on adjacent industrial land. So that's one potential thing to think about, whether or not. First of all, do you agree with that language, and do you agree with that being included as a condition?
Would you need to say current permitted uses?
Well, this proposal, I think it would be specific to this proposal. We can't just say it's all proposed, look, say.
I know that, but even this proposal of even saying current permitted uses.
Well, I think that the first one expresses the concern expressed about potential future uses. And there's the complaint one, and I mean, you could. I don't know if that hits the mark as testified.
You read that again?
Sure, that the use not be a deterrent or inhibitant to permitted uses.
Can you change that to shall not?
Of course, yeah. Shall not be a deterrent or inhibitant to permitted uses on adjacent industrial land.
Doesn't really say future. That's permitted.
Yeah, so that could be current or future. Or we go wild and crazy past, but I don't know how that would make sense.
I kind of have issue with it just because I think that it's a statement with no teeth behind it. And it seems like it's out of our authority, really. And I would hate to take away from the Amani Center if, per se, they started manufacturing marijuana there and the smell infringed on the Amani Center. I mean, if I was all of a sudden adjacent to a noxious smell that I couldn't deal with, I wouldn't want to have given my rights away to complain.
That's the downside of building in an industrial. It's a natural consequence to building in light industrial.
Could we sign a covenant with them? That's what they do for farm and forestry practices like you were talking about, Jacob.
Could.
It is a conditional use permit. It's not an outright permitted use.
So there is a second condition, and I think that covers some of the complaint driven things. I want to hear what you have for that.
Yeah, so that one is an acknowledgement of surrounding industrial uses and that there will be no complaint of those uses on adjacent industrial land.
Yeah, I think that.
Yeah.
I think that probably covers
So-
about as much as we can do.
Yeah.
My understanding was that that was pleasing to the applicants.
So that's on the table for your consideration. The 2 items.
Yeah, it's fine by me. As somebody that's lived out here for 25 years, the town has smelled far worse. It's like, you know, it's like depending on how the wind blows, it's like. Modern HVAC now has filters and scrubbers and all kinds of stuff on it. And most people that are inside don't notice anything that's a block away.
Everyone just said that was snow.
You live on that street, not so much.
So those are the things to consider once we figure everything else out, for motion or not.
Or not, I guess. I was hoping for a nod or not, but. Okay. You walk through.
Yeah. What were you gonna do?
Okay. So going through the conditions that start on page 11. The meat of them is on page 12, if you want to follow along. So prior to issuance of a building permit, we need to see some plans that are revised. And so A through F there show all the revisions. Based on some conversations around the walkway, I have some proposed changes to these suggested conditions. So if the commission is amenable to being flexible about the walkway, you know, they propose an alternative to this easement. I would suggest changing condition A or revising condition A so that they submit a revised walkway plan that's approved by the city. And basically condition A would cover that revised plan. And also, if you just look down a little bit, condition lowercase b talks about proof of that pedestrian access easement. I would just add if proposed, so that way they can revert back. If they do end up wanting to go that route, we can still require that pedestrian access easement and they can still go that route. So I would add language to lowercase b, you know, if proposed, a copy of the pedestrian access easement to McNulty Way. And then I would revise condition A to first state a walkway plan to be approved by the city.
No question.
Yeah.
So if they're gonna utilize the existing sidewalk in the other property,
Mhm.
does that require an easement?
Yeah, that's a good point. We would need an easement for that.
Built.
Yeah, so we should probably, yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's a good point.
You have to have an easement for a sidewalk?
Well, it's through private property. It's not a public roadway sidewalk. Yeah, but fortunately, it's the same owner, so we know that it's not gonna be a contentious.
It's not a sidewalk in front of a business, it's a sidewalk in front of a business.
Not on the
It's,
street.
it's an internal walkway in their site.
Right
yeah,
on the
it's-
street, please.
It's.
And we have 3 buildings. And the walkways are in front of all of the buildings so that people don't have to.
So,
Do you have an alternative place for a walkway too? That's just the easiest, least expensive way to do it.
Well, it makes more sense to
Right.
cover less ground with concrete.
correct, any illumination is easier to do. So I would amend condition lowercase b to say a copy of the recorded pedestrian access easement to McNulty Way, just take out McNulty Way and just say to the roadway. Or something, you know, make it more vague. To roadway,
Amend it to as discussed.
yeah,
It adds a public improvement component that wasn't there before.
that's true.
And then also an acknowledgement, there's an acknowledgement of the acceptability of off-site improvements.
Okay,
Because these are public street improvements not adjacent to the subject property. The applicant testified that that would be acceptable. But it is gonna be a public sidewalk, and so it's something that our city engineering department would need to review. And being street improvements, it's slightly more than just the sidewalk. This is the curb, the landscape strip, and the sidewalk.
But because it's owned by the same property owner. And she's putting.
That's public, right away.
Yeah, it's adjacent, that certainly helps.
Right.
That helps with the favorable view on that by the applicant. But it's still something we want to make sure is addressed.
With additional.
Yeah, so it would be the whole conditions about public improvements and engineering buying off. And then also just acknowledgement that it's no longer just the roadway that abuts this property, that they are saying we're willing to elect to build frontage improvements on an adjacent property. To meet that condition, so.
This would have to be.
Okay.
This could all stay.
Mostly this already. A little more complicated than it sounded like initially.
That's what I thought.
It's all that come on there too.
It's not too bad, but just a few things to make sure
Tweaks.
captured in your ultimate decision.
We need to work out the language or.
No, I think that concept, I've got it, we can work on that.
I'll review it.
Basically, as long as the commission's cool with giving them the flexibility to go that alternative route, we'll make it work in the conditions.
I like this route better than the original one anyway.
The original route cuts through a piece of property we do not own, and it destroys any growth for that particular company.
Right, and that's what I thought, that's creating a lot of conflict down the road.
Right.
It seems simpler.
Right.
Kind of a formal process. You had your time to talk, but
Yeah.
we're kind of informal too, so it's okay.
Yeah.
But let's keep that down to the next, because it's closed.
So the elimination plan we talked about, the tree inventory, if you're all comfortable with that, I'm not suggesting changes to those B and C. D, we had some testimony about bike parking. Have you guys thought about if you want to require the 4 spaces, should it be covered or not covered? I just need that.
4 and covered.
4 and covered.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
If you're gonna do it once, do it right.
Oh, but I screwed up.
So that's the only thing in red. If you're comfortable, the other items we've talked about, you know, we have to make city engineering happy with stormwater, they have to pay a sewer fee. If there's any questions about the other conditions in black, otherwise I don't think we really need to discuss them. So I just back to the 2 conditions that Jacob proposed. I'll read them again, and if I get them slightly wrong, I apologize. So we discussed adding a condition 20 that says the proposed use shall not be a current or inhibitant to current or future permitted uses on adjacent industrial land. That was proposed condition 20. And then 21 was an acknowledgement of surrounding industrial uses, and that there will be no complaints regarding said industrial uses. So kind of wordy one, but I think the point is made.
I don't know if you need to clarify light industrial uses, because that's the zone. As opposed to just industrial.
Did I say light?
Well, your property is.
My property is M2, it is light industrial, but the permitted uses allowed would keep us from doing any heavy industrial things on that piece of land.
For bookwork, I thought the language should all be the same for light industrial.
I like the second one.
He's talking about both.
I'm just rereading them for discussion. I'm not proposing any, it's up to you guys.
I don't think there's any harm to the first one. I don't think it's necessarily going to prevent future laws from taking effect, but we can say it if we like.
I'm not the legal eagle.
I like both of them. Both of them.
Someone wanna make a motion?
Yeah, I think it could. I think a motion, to accept staff's, recommended decisions with those.
Move we approve with staff conditions and adjustments as discussed.
Second.
How do you vote?
Right.
Right?
Aye. Jennifer?
I'm an I as well.
Yeah. The motion you agree this time?
Yes, so moved.
Second. And you vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi.
Okay, my. Excuse me. Final decision of the planning commission may be appealed to the city council. The notice of decision will be mailed to all persons who testified or submitted comments, and the appeal deadline will be included in the notice. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You've been here.
Somebody would.
You had bought it from Union Curve, and then I got.
About killing trees, when I asked you to submit copies of the narrative shorter, you had to kill so many trees.
I guess that's a good.
Constructive assistance.
Yeah, that's what we'll call it. Have a good night, guys.
Thanks.
Yeah. I was remiss early, for not introducing our new Commissioner Rosengard. Welcome. Thank you. Earlier.
All good to be here.
Is there a brief, seconder?
Who I am?
Yeah.
Sure, I'm David Rosengard, I moved to St. Helens, oh gosh, about 5-6 years ago, and my wife and I are thrilled to be here. We live in historic house being fire repaired on 3rd Street, and I'm by profession, I'm an animal lawyer who does crime victim rights work, so it's all kind of work I do.
I've never seen your, never seen your face, do nothing about it.
No, this is who I am. I'm thrilled to be here, happy to help out.
Great. All right. Time is now 7:37 PM and the public hearing is now open. There's a legislative land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request for a comprehensive plan, map amendment from light industrial LI to general residential, and zoning map amendment from light industrial LI to general residential R5 at 475 North Central Creeks, lots 4, 5, 22, and 23, lot 5, Railroad Edition to St. Helens. The applicant is Andrew H. Stamp, farmer of Lyle Fotherham LLP. Because legislative proceedings require the observance of certain procedural formalities, we'll take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest or bias in this matter?
I would like to disclose that I have a business financial relationship with the property owner, but it does not affect my decision in any way whatsoever.
It's not related to this property?
Not related to this property.
Okay, does anyone, the audience object to the ability of a commissioner to make a fair decision? Can you hear okay?
Yep.
Oh, I can't hear, no,
We're good. You want to come a little closer to here or?
well, I'll struggle through it.
I'll try to talk a little louder.
Thank you.
Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows: required statements, staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, final questions, close of the record, deliberations, and recommendations. The following statements are required to be made at the next of the hearing. Standards for recommendation by the commission shall be based on St. Helens Municipal Code 17120.120. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable standards as described or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or land use regulation, which the person believes applies to the decision. Staff report?
Yes. So this is a zoning map and comprehensive map plan change, and basically we're going from an industrial designation, a light industrial designation to residential. And it's kind of an interesting property from a zoning standpoint. On three sides, it's surrounding by residential now. And the one side that's industrial is part of the old Friesen mill site. Those of you who've been around long enough for that mill went kaput, I don't know, 15 years ago or so. And so we have 4 standard city lots that we're dealing with. The property was historically developed with a single family dwelling, which had been there for most of the 20th century. It was recently demoed after it was purchased by the owner, and the owner did apply for a land use permit, which is part of the record now, for an industrial use. And they got through the paper portion and then decided, well, maybe I'll change the color on the map to go to residential. And it was kind of interesting, you know, if you look at the property and the old mill site, it's kind of a weird extension of industrial. So anyways, there you can see it's surrounded on 3 sides. If we go to the aerial photo, you can kind of see, so there's the super tall wall fence that surrounds the old mill, and you can see that wall here. And it's the one developed property that's zoned industrial in this pocket of industrial that's outside of that wall. And so being the, the planning nerd I am, I looked at some of the old zoning maps. If we go back to the 1952 zoning map, which is the oldest one we have, the property is zoned 2-family residential, just like the surrounding area. And that makes sense. The house predated that 1952 map. And then in 78, it was split down the middle. And I wonder if that was an error. So that industrial zoning was halfway through that lot. But then on the 80 map, it shows it as industrial. It's been like that ever since. I'm not sure when that wall was built. I have the earliest convenient aerial photo I have is a 1983 one in my office, and it didn't look like that wall was in place then. So it's kind of weird that it's industrial, and honestly, it makes it kind of an easier decision, at least from a staff perspective. Because if you were to guess what its zoning would be without looking at the zoning map, you'd probably guess it's residential, just like the rest of the neighborhood. I don't know if it was owned by the mill when the modern zoning 1980 and on came into play. Why it was like that, I just know it's been like that for several decades. So that's kind of the premise behind it. Even though it's kind of weird and it makes sense just from an intuitive standpoint, we still have to check some boxes. And there's 2 main boxes we need to check. One is our economic opportunities analysis, and that's just our adopted document that helps make sure that we have sufficient employment lands in the 20-year planning horizon. It's kind of an old document from 2008. And it showed that we have plenty of acreage. The numbers are in the staff report, and this doesn't reduce that by much. I do note in the staff report that this is a property that has access to utilities, and a lot of our industrial property does not. And that's not me trying to throw shade at this proposal. We are looking at updating our economic opportunities analysis, and really I'm just trying to plant seeds of thought for this undertaking that we're gonna have pretty soon. Because really there should be more metrics than just acres, but for now, that's what we have adopted, and that's what we have to look at. Another important thing that we need to look at, and I just got an email today from the Fair Housing Council of Oregon. For many years, they have been looking at amendments and making sure state planning goal 10 for housing is addressed. And we didn't address it very thoroughly in here, but that can easily be added for the purposes of the city council report. I don't see a problem with our housing needs analysis. It just adds some residential property to the mix. And so that should be a problem. So just be aware that's probably a change that we'll see in the council report compared to this one. We don't see a lot of problems with it. It makes sense. That's all I have to say.
But it has adequate sewer where it is.
Yeah, sewer, water, it's all right there.
'Cause I know we have spots where there might be sewer in the road, but it's overdue for upgrade. So I just wanna make sure before we do.
Well, I mean, that's a problem citywide.
Well, some areas are working.
And for the purposes of the zone change, you know, there's gonna be a sewerage need regardless. And so it's kind of a neutral from that standpoint.
I was just making sure that we weren't, cause there's some streets that you told us that it's at capacity. You know, there's no multifamily coming there until the upgrades are done.
Yeah, the discussions that we've had before was, you know, whether or not we impose a moratorium because of our sewer issue. The city council did not want to pursue that. It was kind of talked about in the last hearing where we have this fee structure based on how bad the sewage system is. But because we're just changing the color on the zoning map and not necessarily resulting in a potential more intense use from the sewerage standpoint, it's not something we dived into.
And it's 2 lots.
It's 4 lots.
4 lots.
It's 4 good old standard City of St. Helens lots. And you can see them, they're 2 tax lots, but if you see the rectangle surrounding it, at least the more predominant one, that's your standard size lot. And so it's 4 city lots, 4 platted city lots.
50 by 100.
I think they are the 58 by 100 lots, if I.
50.
Oh, they're 50 by 100, okay. So it's not part of the original subdivision, it's a later one.
I would bet that was owned by the mill because I used to own the property on the west side directly across the street on 13th and I bought it from the mill. So.
Oh.
Okay, well, that shares some history.
Any other questions or any questions of the staff? All right. Applicant, you have a presentation? Oh, closer, Wayne, so you can hear better. Wayne, want to come closer? Welcome.
Good evening, members of the planning commission. My name is Andrew Stamp. I'm a land use attorney at Val Fotheringham LLP. I was on my own for a long time, but I finally decided I was tired of the administrative side of that, so I went to a firm. I'm here representing longtime client Wayne Wygan. I'm sure you all know Wayne, because we've been before you before on other matters. This one's, I think, pretty straightforward. If I could get you to do slide turning for me. We've already seen where the property is. You're all familiar with us, so I'll skip that. This slide's probably the one that I want to focus on the or one of the most, because what you see there originally residential lots, as Jacob said, it takes access from residential street. That makes it a little bit weird for industrial. You know, it's kind of like, wow, you got to go through a residential neighborhood to get to it. As you can tell, I don't know the story behind this, but obviously it has something to do, that story, if we could go back in our Wayback Machine, it has something to do with the mill. You know, they either wanted a buffer or they talked someone into zoning it that way so they could expand or something. I don't know exactly what. But now that the mill's there, it doesn't seem to me to make any sense to leave it
as industrial property. Now, Wayne originally tried to develop it under the industrial zoning, and what he ran into, and I think I can get this on the next slide. Oh, this shows just a Google Earth photograph of the site. You can kind of see it. You can see and that's looking towards the north. You can see that big wooden wall that was kind of separates it from the rest of the industrial site. So what Wayne found out was this wasn't really ideal site to develop separate from the lumber mill site. The biggest problem was the setback requirements, because in your code, you've got a setback that creates a buffer between industrial and residential. And it turned out that buffer ends up being 30% of the site. And so you can't use 30% of the site for building because of that additional setback. And so once you start thinking about how you're going to plan the rest of the site, it quickly becomes problematic. The other thing that you had a bunch of on-site parking requirements, which are all, that makes sense. But that also started to take away additional space that was left. And so once Wayne's consultants were kind of figuring out what was left that you could actually build as an industrial site, it was a very small building, and it just started to be like, well, is this even something that we can market to anyone? And the answer Wayne decided was, no, this doesn't make any sense. So that's really the reasons we're coming to you. And as Jacob said, there's some planning requirements. One of the big things when you rezone property from light industrial to residential, or from residential to light industrial, is you have to make sure that you're still complying with the goals, and the goals say you have a certain amount of land for industrial, a certain amount of commercial, a certain amount for residential. And if you're going to switch between them, you got to make sure you still have enough of that remaining category to meet your planning assumptions for the planning horizon. So that's oftentimes something that kills zone changes. But in this case, we looked at it. There does seem to be a surplus of industrial land, in particular because there's been some large properties that are closed. I think St. Helens has had a hard time with industrial land, given that the timber, this seems like there was a lot of timber businesses here a long time ago, and that seems to be something that's not as viable as it once was. So from our perspective, it looked like the loss of 20,000 square feet of industrial land is fairly insignificant. On the other hand, we've had discussions here before the Planning Commission about how important the housing crisis is in Oregon. And so we felt like, having the opportunity to build 8 attached residential units that don't suffer from that same setback problem would be beneficial to the community. So, talk about needed housing. I won't belabor the matter because it doesn't seem to be too much opposition to it tonight. So with that, it's our hope that the commission will agree with staff that this is a viable proposal for a zone change, and will approve or recommend approval to the city council. Do you have? Oh, ma'am.
My question, I guess, is of staff. It's like, once the zone is changed, then a fourplex is a permitted use. Concern being, people that see zone changes maybe don't realize what's happening. And I just think about all the neighbors that live around there. And I just want to make sure, is there any other, did they all get notified and they know this was happening?
The notice area was huge, 300 feet. And they are proposing R5, which is to the east and to the south. You do have apartment residential to the west, which is the higher density, but they're electing to go with the R5, which is the predominant zone.
Right.
So to answer your question specifically, there are a variety of uses allowed in the R5 zone. You could take each lot and just put a single family dwelling on it. You could take each lot and put a duplex on it. You could take each lot and divide them into two. And have attached housing, or you could use all four together and have a multi-dwelling or apartment complex. So all those things are possible. I think the apartment complex is probably a permitted use. I can check. It may be conditional use.
I just, it's like whenever. In the times I've been with the city and just seeing not this individual's development, but other developments that look good on paper, and all of a sudden we realize there's not enough egress for that many cars. Or there was no opportunity for the neighbors to realize what was really going on, and they always come in here and yell at us like, what the hell were you doing? And so that's why I'm just seeing it, that if it's outright permitted use, it's permitted use, but if there's another opportunity for neighbors to weigh in on, like tonight with the earlier hearing with somebody talking about neighborhood use. Just like, I'm just wondering if there is any more.
Yeah, I mean, if it was multifamily,
There's a conditional use in the R5 zone for multifamily, I just looked.
okay,
So there is an opportunity for.
Okay, I just thought, because sometimes on paper, it's like, oh, it's only gonna be 2 houses, and then it's like 8.
but. If the goal was to avoid that notice requirement, they could just put a duplex on each lot, which is outright permitted.
Right.
That's 8 units.
Right, and that's
That's
we already
totally
did that
out.
hoop because the state said we have to approve higher density within neighborhoods, so.
We no longer have single families.
Yeah, the Senate Bill
Zoning.
158 really.
Yeah, we went through.
changed that. Interestingly enough, I mean, the last time I was here with Wayne, we were talking about a rezone from, I think it was R7 to R5, and one of the arguments we made was, that would be a more affordable price point.
I live in a duplex, you don't have to sell me.
Well, what I wanted to say was, I was kind of disappointed when I found out how much the houses were going for, because that was more than we were hoping. We were hoping to hit a lower price point. But even in that amount of time, the data that we had available to us when we talked to the planning commission, to the time that the houses were actually built, the numbers had gone up, and I was like.
And they remembered you saying that too.
Did they?
Yeah.
Well,
Some of the commissioners are no longer.
Well, and I felt bad about it, because I really meant what I said, but that just shows you that the price of housing is going up so much, and so I think here we have even something that's more affordable than what we were proposing last time, and.
I was just asking the question for the record.
Yeah.
Cause then it's just for the record. I mean,
Okay.
It doesn't mean a yes or a no or whatever, it's just for the record, that's the rule. And so it was part of this hearing, so we weren't ignoring the rules, that's all I was just saying.
Well, and I only made that point because I remember, that conversation, and then when I found out 2 years later that the houses were much more than I anticipated they were, and I was like, how did that happen?
Yeah, in the middle of building my houses, the cost of plywood doubled.
Yeah.
One load of plywood in the next load, so nobody can predict that. Anyways.
Yeah, I had some experience with that myself, where there was a slat wall piece that was $200, and I bought 4 pieces, and then I said, well, that's really nice, I'm gonna go buy some more, and I came back, I said, I had like 4 more pieces of that, and it was $500 a sheet, and I'm like, oh, well, never mind. So that was the shock to me, how, 100 or 200% rise or whatever it was, so. Anyway, that was all the prepared comments I had. I wanted to keep it really short. Rain, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Well, the only thing I have to say is that any usage that would go on the property would be per ordinance. There's no variances that I'll be requesting. And to me, it's fairly straightforward. I'm probably getting to the age where I won't be doing a lot of building anymore, but I do have interested family and friends that will probably like to visit this market as soon as the land use is done, all subject to the interest rates and the building costs. And there are duplexes and or rural lot lines in the community, some within a stone's throw of this piece of property, others planned.
They fit into the neighborhood well. They'll meet all parking requirements that are given. There will be no variance requests for anything. And, to me, it's pretty straightforward after street improvements are done and, everything hooked up and landscape completed, you'll have some new homes. So that's kind of where we're headed.
I have a question, maybe I'm mixed up on the location, but was there a wetland delineation done on this property?
There is not. I hired Andrew Nemi, and they inspected the property, and I have a letter saying that there is no wetlands.
Was that sent to Department of State Lands?
Pardon?
Was that sent as a delineation to Department of State Lands for review?
Oh, golly.
He's asking if that letter was sent to DSL, as a formal delivery.
I kept it in my file.
Okay.
Sounds like the answer is no, but that'll definitely be something we want to take care of.
It was. Sure thought it was that property. It was the one, is there a development proposed for 14th Street?
Oh, yeah, there was, that was to the west of that.
Okay. It's pretty wet.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's substantial ponding from highway runoff that comes across Highway 30 from the rock pit and other upland areas where the cameras.
That was here.
I wasn't involved with it in particular, so I couldn't remember that property or our property, so.
And Grayson Lumber Company property has a storm drain that goes through it. But it doesn't really catch the ponding that is to the west of this piece of property.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Yeah, you guys just stay there if you want, there's nobody else around. So there's no neutral testimony or support, we're all off in the rebuttal and that stuff. All right, it's. There's no closing over here.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the script. Well, the hearing is now closed. Am I supposed to say something else? Who brings up these things?
Legislative ones, similar.
All right, well, it's pretty good. Hearing no further questions from the commission, no further responses from staff, the public record is closed. This matter is returned to the table for deliberations and oral discussion. Okay. I don't know what to do, but on my script. All right.
The recommendation to the city council.
We recommend that we approve the change to general residential as code.
Second. How do you vote?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Jennifer?
Aye, I as well.
Okay. I guess we need the signature.
So moved?
No?
No, this is the council.
Oh.
Okay, also a recommendation. Okay, yeah. The commission only provides a recommendation to the council on this matter who will conduct the decision. So subsequent public hearing. So good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. And see you, Wayne.
Good to see you guys too.
Not nice to see me.
Oh, yeah, I see you. See you as up. We're really just you.
I'm a sensitive attorney, you know.
Your
feelings.
Good night.
Just kidding.
All right.
I had them surgically removed, you know. See ya. Good to see you.
Bye, Andrew.
Okay. Discussion items, planning commission vacancy term expirations.
Okay, so first of all, we get a take on Russ Lowe.
What's the question?
So Russ, the end of your first partial term ends this calendar year. And we just want to make sure you want to continue on for your first full term.
I don't mind continuing on, but there's a huge caveat to it. I'm gonna miss January or December's meeting, probably January's, May, June, July, August, and September. So
Is that a regular thing or just next year?
it could be a regular thing. We're sailing to Alaska for 5 months, so.
Oh,
That's like half a year.
And I will likely be in remote areas that don't have much for internet coverage, so. Saying that makes me say I should probably resign. However, if I did that, I'm willing to stay on as long as needed. Except for the times I said I was gonna be gone in order to help out while you're finding new applicants.
well, cause he's here in November and he won't be here December or January.
So you're
Well-
here February and March.
Maybe January, I'm not sure yet, but yeah, February, March, April. And then we're leaving in May for 5 months. Kind of the trip of a lifetime deal.
Now you're retired, so. Okay, that's good to know. At least we know it in advance, so they're excused, so it wouldn't necessarily be.
That said, I'm willing to stay on. I don't think it's fair for me to do that under these circumstances, so.
Yeah. Okay. So you will hang on
Through April.
until we
Fill your seat.
yeah, so you would like us to start looking at,
Yeah, and like, there's no hurry, just understand that I'm gonna be gone a lot.
okay. No, that's good to know. So does anybody from the commission object to that circumstance? Cause we might as well go through the reappointment formalities.
No.
And so how does that work? We'd have to reappoint him.
Then I would have to resign when you have a new applicant.
And then you resign, we get a new, we could start the process of letting happen.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it'd be for another 4 years, but then he would cut off.
And then somebody else would start and complete that.
Finish those ones, yeah.
another partial term. Okay, so then for December, we'll have that appointment. On the agenda.
Maybe easier just to get a satellite phone.
I have satellite internet, but I can't necessarily rely on it.
Giving you a hard time, Russ.
I might make a couple of things off. Depends on the coverage.
Okay.
My term ended this year, but
You looking forward to that?
You wanna retire from all things?
sounds good to me. But no, I got another year.
So the other thing that we need to talk about, Russ Hubbard is now a counselor. So he's no longer on the commission. We had, we advertised that opening and it ended around October 10th, and we thought we were gonna have the meeting, but it was canceled. And the only applicant we got was Steve Toski. Now, Steve is an attorney. And per state law, we cannot have more than 2 people in the same profession on a group, and so we have 2 attorneys.
We filled it up.
All right. So Mr. Toski is not eligible.
Go ahead.
Christina started to look at some of our past applicants. And got response from one of them who's having a child and can't commit. We'll give it a little bit more time to see what kind of if we have enough of an applicant pool from some of those past ones, we may need to re-advertise.
I quite honestly think with him leaving, I think re-advertising is prudent.
I do too.
As long as it takes to get anybody that is of any quality. I think I'd rather have a bigger pool than be sweeping up the desk.
Yeah,
You know anybody? I could, you never know.
so that's a point well taken and makes sense. So that's good. I think we will pursue that. I'm assuming our counselor agrees with that.
I would agree with that, yes.
It'd be nice if we had a small business owner. I mean, not that that's a requirement, but we have legalese and governmentese, and I never remember what Russ does.
40 years in commercial construction.
There you go. So I think about, we have so much Main Street stuff. And so much neighborhood stuff that sometimes it'd be nice to have the voice of. Just an idea.
Okay, yeah, that's a good thought to fill out the basketball.
Just kind of to just diversify a little bit.
You could have a builder, but
Well, I did talk to Russ, and doesn't his term end soon on the council?
Russ
Hubbard.
term end on
I
the
thought, I wondered that too, Mark.
What's that?
I wondered that too. How long is
Because
he?
he took Berkeley's spot, and I believe that he should be reelected, and I asked him not to put words in his mouth, but he did not want to run for reelection, which could potentially put him back on.
So he could come back.
That was what I was trying to get at.
I think it may have been a year left.
Yeah, it's a year.
It would end in November.
Ballot next November 2024.
Yeah, I asked him the same thing, and that was his same response to me. He did not want to run. So.
Interesting.
So I think that's kind of, he took the position of, helping out. He didn't take the position because I want a life in politics.
All right, that settles it. He's back on.
But at the very least, we need to figure out who our planning commission interview committee is.
I'd like to do it again. I volunteer.
Yeah, so 2 or 3 people to help interview when we have a pool. So it sounds like a Shoemaker is one of those. Unless someone objects.
I'd be willing to.
Yeah.
Shoemaker and Carrie. And we could have another one, but we don't need to. Our council liaison is that too by default.
In the event somebody can't do it, I would.
What you really wanted to.
I don't really want to do much.
So you are willing to be an alternate.
An alternate, just in case the dates don't work out for somebody.
Or I'm gone.
Or if Dan wins the lottery and retires permanently.
I mean, my wife retires.
There you go.
Okay, cool. All right. I think that's it for that item for now.
I had questions when you get to the other part where there's more questions.
Oh, just general questions?
I always feel like I'm talking at the wrong time.
So I mean, at the end, after we get through the agendas, what you're.
Yeah, you usually have a staff report and updates and stuff,
Oh, okay,
that part.
okay.
All right.
That's where she resigns.
Go ahead. The joint meeting with the city council.
Yeah, so I don't know if we've had any of our joint meetings this year. But the December's coming up. And so we always talk about, well, do you want to have it? And do you want to talk about anything? The one thing I thought about talking about would be, it's just ironic that the psilocybin stuff came up, or the psilocybin rules. If you recall, the city adopted a 2-year moratorium on those uses to kind of figure out how the cards were gonna fall and to look at passing any regulations that we thought were necessary. And some time has passed and we're getting into winter, which is a good time to work on code stuff. And so that's one thing we could talk about. Although we don't have to have a joint meeting to do that. But first, I guess first of all, you want to have the joint meeting.
So what day? Let's talk about dates.
It's the second Wednesday of the month.
13th, December 13th. It's usually before council, or it's 6 o'clock. Is that
I can't remember the time.
It was scheduled for 4 o'clock.
Earlier.
4 to 6?
4 to whenever.
Yeah, okay. It's been a long time since we had.
December 13th.
So we know Lowe's you're not available, right? You said you were out.
Yeah.
December.
Till 15.
I will be here that Tuesday, but I'm not there on Wednesday. I said I can't.
Okay. David's out.
It might make January meeting.
We did have one, like, early spring, I think.
Yeah, we had one, because I remember sitting and listening, it was an ordeal.
Oh, we probably discussed 3115s.
That's the one.
Yeah, we did.
I missed on.
Lucky.
I'd like to see us have the meeting since we didn't do it last time.
Nice.
It would be nice to get back on a different footing also.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Constructive.
And, you know, we can think of things to talk about, and it may just be a general discussion about things. There's a lot going on in the city, and so just having a discussion between the groups alone has value. So you don't have to recommend any subject matter, it's just an opportunity to start looking into that. But it sounds like you are on board with meeting, at least for those of you who will be here.
Yes.
Okay. Cool, so unless you have any more to say on that, we can move on.
What was the sensitive lands permit on the Lady Drive? Just on the mining director decision?
One for Chief.
Yeah. Excuse you.
Oh, so in Elk Ridge. They were, so some of those lots, there's a flat area and then there's a pretty steep slope down to the road, Perry Creek Road in this case.
Yeah.
And they wanted to expand some of that flatter area, and that got into the steep slope.
Yeah. So the sensitive land was steep slope?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, so a slope exceeding 25%.
And they did.
So there's a wall involved and.
Okay, I never heard there was some big deal. Okay, thank you. Any other questions of planning director decisions? Yeah, about the activity report for September, October. To talk about?
Yeah, I forgot to look at my reports to remember what was in there. I would say that the police station became a pretty big item to deal with for a bit. So a lot of my time was taken up on that.
What happened to that after we?
The council reversed the denial, they approved it. And the final decision goes before the council for mayor's signature. Tomorrow. Yeah.
I attended that hearing because I was interested just to see the process, and it was fascinating because obviously it seems like they use us as the applicant kind of uses us as a sounding board, and then they regroup and see the things we had issue with, and it was a different presentation to them than it was to us. So I don't know if that's typical, but the process was interesting.
I think it.
He voted against it, so.
He's the only one.
I think every time I've seen the planning commission reject an application, there's going back to the workshop and rethinking how to frame the application.
Yeah.
Even some of the famous ones, I mean, it's ironic that Andrew Stamp was in there talking about that zone change.
They give a whole different presentation to council.
Yeah.
Different presentation.
And
They answer all of these questions when they send it to the next group.
I mean, wouldn't you?
It just, it makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like they had a chance to redo.
That's why I don't get all,
I don't get all butthurt about it.
when they make a different decision, because
It's a process.
it's a different group. We made our decision based on the best we could do.
And I know from a staff standpoint, you know, one of the things I like to say, which is just, it's kind of a joke, but it's true, is you hurry up and get the staff report done. You're meeting that deadline, and then once the staff report's done, then you start thinking about it. And when you have an appeal, you think about it more. And so from a staff standpoint, you know, it's just human nature.
Well, and I'm not saying they did anything wrong. I just found it interesting because if they would have presented some of the things that they did then to us, the decision might have been different.
And
Is there a wider access road to the back?
no,
Oh. Okay.
we did talk about that concern of the planning commission, so.
The CCMH zone change was approved. That was also a decision that got switched.
Yeah, that's why she was still.
But I voted on the other side of that one.
Yeah.
But both of them, that, I think the second reading for that's tomorrow as well. So those decisions go out, and then we'll see if there's a challenge.
I have a couple, if there are more questions, just quick things. The Working Community Paths Grant, we're still working on statement of work for that, so. This is a grant for a study to look at a trail, an off-street trail from St. Helens to Scappoose. So 7.5 miles, up to 7 miles. My goal with that will be to convene the county and Scappoose and the city in the same room to look at route alternatives and kind of land on a preferred route. The grant will only cover a 30% design. So it's only going to take us up to kind of a concept design with a cost estimate that then we can take and get further funding.
You got the grant, you say?
We did, yeah. So it'll be a while till we're under contract with ODOT. Their contracting team is really slow. So it'll be a while before we kick the project off, but I'm starting to review the statement of work for that.
You involved in that?
Yeah, I'm hoping that there will be opportunity for a technical advisory committee where we select members, kind of handpick them based on expertise, and Dan's expertise with wetlands will be incredibly helpful for that. So I'm hoping that. I'm hoping. And
I'm
then
curious, with that, that's not, is it planned to just parallel the highway, or is there any thoughts on that?
yeah, all we know is that working with ODOT Rail is very difficult. And so it's probably not gonna assume ODOT Rail right of way. It'll probably be through existing rights of way that either the county has or the two respective cities has, or we're getting easements through private property. Or, you know, eminent domain, I guess. We're gonna look at all options. I mean, we don't know. That's part of the study. Yeah, ideally it'd be on the east side too. That's kind of.
But generally though, it's just a point A to point B, and what's the best
Yeah.
way to do that.
That's way to get there.
And then the EOA that Jacob talked about, the really old economic opportunities analysis, we're supposed to find out very soon if we got that grant. So that'll be kicking off fairly soon, another planning process that you'll probably see before you for adoption at the very least, but you'll probably also be involved at joint planning commission, city council meetings. There'll probably be a collab on that. And then engineering department spearheaded a grant for a transportation systems plan update. And that was successful. So they got 300,000. Again, ODOT contracting is very slow. So that project probably won't kick off for another 6 months, but there will be an advisory committee, just like all other.
How long ago did we do that other transportation systems plan?
So the citywide one was 2011 when it was adopted.
But then we did another one in between.
We did 2.
Cause I heard TSP a lot of times while I was on council.
Yeah, then we did the corridor master plan in 2015, which looked at Holton mostly. And then we did the riverfront connector plan, which then looked at through our downtown, through the waterfront site. So now we're looking citywide again. starting the process all over.
It just seems like a lot of money spent on air. Books that never get looked at.
Well, part of it is to consolidate all of these recommendations from these refinement plans into one implementable document, so we kind of agree with that.
Yeah, I understand that,
Yeah.
but the community sees these huge numbers and they don't see any boots on the ground.
Yeah.
And that's what they see, and they don't ever hear this conversation, and so it's really, as a city council or as a planning commissioner, can be a difficult conversation to have in the community.
Yeah, but it's not coming out of our coffers. This is all grant money. It's just in kind from.
It's a different kind of tax, is what people tell me. You know, it's like now that property tax will go up, or this tax will go up, but you know, it's out of our control, it's state level stuff. This is money that better spent here than somewhere else.
And it gets our project list updated,
Right.
which will affect system development charges down the road.
I look at it as Mount St. Helens prevention.
That's good.
There you go.
Is this the question part?
And that was all I had, so yes.
I wanted updates on construction in the community.
Oh.
So I just noticed that the apartments on Gable have implemented the streetscape plan, the first and only full implementation of
The riverfront connector, yeah.
I was with the raceway and,
Cycle track.
yeah, it's not wide enough sidewalk, not a multi-use sidewalk, but it's narrow sidewalk.
I watch it every day.
Narrow lane.
I drive that road 5 times
It's
a day.
supposed to be narrow. It's working.
It's traffic calming.
Yeah, your people better go slow there, right? That's
Yeah.
kind of the goal.
And it's gonna help with pedestrian crossings, having that refuge.
The slurry of people that go back and forth to Walmart is unreal.
Well, I can't
Because
see.
I travel that road like 6 times a day.
It is a drastic narrowing of the travel lane all at once, though. I mean, that travel,
It's
yeah,
even more so now with
construction.
the construction stuff and everything else for sure, but
But that travel lane was massive, and then you just had the super wide shoulder. I mean, it was extra wide. So now we have a normal travel lane and it's like jarring.
In our engineering department they need to get approval from ODOT to reduce the posted speed. And they're in the process of doing that. Going to 25?
Yeah, so that posted
the
speed.
posted speeds are wacky.
Yeah.
The whole way on that road, because one way on one part of the road is 25. The other way, the same part of the road is 30.
There's parts of it that are.
And it's like, okay, which one, if I'm going that way, I can go 30.
Yeah.
Have a good defense on a speeding ticket then.
From what I understand too, ODOT doesn't give us our own authority to regulate our speed limits until we've gone through this process a number of times. We're just not a big enough city, so this is the first time that we're ever asking for that change. So we're just growing. It's a sign of a growing community.
And then we have the 25 to go over the one bridge that nobody follows.
Oh, yeah, near McCormick, yeah.
Imagine when there was no pedestrian bridges and there was bicycles in there with you.
I used to try to cross that.
Somebody's gonna die here.
Very-
I wanted just to update on the construction out by the DMV. On what's going on out there. And because everybody has suppositions, I didn't know if we had an occupancy rate on the big Gable apartment. And if we knew what the 3 businesses were gonna be out there by the DMV.
Dairy Queen, Burger King, and some kind of a fast food, fast food.
Is that still the case?
Yeah, so obviously Burger King is very close to getting temporary occupancy. So they can open, they have some loose ends to fill up, but they're coming around. The Fast Lube, of course, you can see I think they're starting to go vertical. I haven't been out there in a bit. But yeah, that's a Fast Lube oil place. It's the same business on this side of Scappoose by the Scappoose Fire District.
Okay.
So it's that same entity, same owner. And then Dairy Queen, we issued the land use decision earlier this year. I'm preparing for a semi-annual report, so I looked at all this today. And yeah, Dairy Queen's weird because we issued the decision and then it's just been crickets. So I don't know what's going on with them, but it is Dairy Queen on the end. and then the larger parcel between Burger King and the fast food place is yet to be determined. No formal application for that yet.
Is there any, I saw that the council or somebody was that property over there, I think it's called Kelly Street. That little flip of a property, is that property planned or did that just get absorbed by that development?
So the city owns a lot there. And the idea was for the two commercial lots that were created. Were going to absorb that. And the council had a hearing on that, which was the same night as the police station and CCMH. Made for a heck of a night, didn't it?
Long, yes.
Yeah, we got Zoom bombed really bad.
Like the last time?
Which is
when
why
it
I'm
happened?
so-
It was worse, it was probably worse than when the planning commission got bombed. No,
I don't think so.
it was about
I
the
don't think
same.
Anything could have been as bad as.
No, there was no pictures on.
We were all on Zoom too.
Yeah, and that was more hardcore porn.
It was
and
hardcore.
Racial comments.
You're here.
The council was more just racial comments. I didn't see what was on the video though.
It was giant screen naked.
Oh, maybe it was Greg Cohen was on Zoom.
Greg was on Zoom.
Yeah, I just remember his face.
That's hard to forget.
It's pretty memorable.
What was stuff on there?
It was my second meeting.
Your second meeting
Well,
ever?
yeah, that's only always gonna be.
Welcome to St. Helens.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that, could be out there brewing? Is anything gonna happen on the car wash property? After they pushed it and pushed it and pushed it, nothing moves there. It's a storage site now.
So that one is owned by Dan Hatfield and Dan. He has several potential projects here. But his efforts are tied up in some project in Kelso right now. And I think once he's done over there, his efforts will start to return here.
Okay, and then the other question I have is it might not be for planning commission, but we have a nuisance ordinance or whatever that says when people's lawn is 3 feet high or when they have dead cars in their grass, that they have to do something about it. I just didn't know, are we not enforcing that anymore? Council used to get nuisance abatements all the time.
Call
And I
code
just-
enforcement.
What?
We have a code enforcement officer.
It's just complaint driven?
Just call non-emergency dispatch.
Okay, I just was curious, cause it's like, as I see stuff pile around.
We have a full-time code enforcement officer for
Okay.
that.
And he likes to go.
What?
He likes to go.
Well, no, I just thought if there's direction from council that like, we have other priorities, we're not picking on people right now.
I haven't heard anything like
I
that.
haven't heard a thing.
Yeah, I
As
haven't.
I see people with crap all over the place, it's like, what the hell?
Be that person.
I think
Because you guys are working, everybody's working so hard to have a better face for St. Helens. And it's like, hold builders, hold property owners responsible to clean up their crap.
I think part of it, just observing things over the years. There's so many projects going on in the city right now. I think it's hard for the council to have that kind of bandwidth. And just observing, things over time. Because we have the St. Helens industrial property, we have this property, we have the police station, these other properties. And then, the homeless stuff we had to deal with. There's just so much.
Is there any update about the homeless enforcement? Are we not doing homeless enforcement? Is that what we elected not to do?
Well, we adopted rules. And the circumstances for St. Helens really didn't change.
Oh, it's been reported to me on multiple occasions that people are coming out of the woods on that wetland adjacent to the Gable Apartments and coming up into that apartment complex. And things are happening. So I just didn't know if there's a homeless camp down in there and there's less than desirable folks.
Well,
Bad things. So
that would be on private property. The rules we dealt with pertain to camping, lying, sleeping,
So I
sheltering
think there's.
on public property.
The only person that can complain about people camping down there are the people that own the property.
Well, I mean, someone could complain based on nuisance.
Sounds like it's trespassing.
Yeah, I mean, I saw four men.
Right, they're coming on to,
Yeah, I saw four men coming up out of the woods when I went over there to pick somebody up. And it's like, I'd never seen them before and they were on foot, coming out of the woods, smoking whatever. And she goes, my lady I picked up, she goes, no, they don't live here.
We get pretty wet now.
Yeah, I just, the apartments get a bad rap for being a location of crime. And some of that, but Jacob's talked about before about landscaping for crime reduction. When people are seen, they tend to do less junk. So I just, hopefully when it opens up to where you can drive that circle, hopefully it'll be easier to patrol and not a dead end. Where people can go back and like garbage cans on fire.
But that's kind of been the trend, when Greystone Estates was developed, that's the subdivision by the DMV. We heard when they started pushing dirt, there was some people that, started out, Violet's Villa, the old mobile home park, which is now.
It's
the other
nice now.
apartment complex,
Yeah.
that was a place where you had some of that.
Unsavory stuff.
Yeah,
I was just curious about the developments, because someone told me Dairy Queen wasn't coming, and someone told me it was Napa out there on the highway. But if it's fast loop, then I can be.
yeah, I mean, Napa, it's still in the rumor mill.
Oh, okay.
There's some truth to it. We just haven't received a
But it's
formal
fast loop
application.
building.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, Napa has been a discussion that has been going on for years and years and years. And the owner said, this year I'm gonna do it, Jacob. And this year's started to come out fast, so.
There you go. No, I just was curious about, and I always call him Builder Bob, but that's not his name. On occupancy on the rest of the apartment complex on Gable.
Oh, yeah, so, yeah, as far as the occupancy, basically the back half. Those buildings have occupancy. Now it's the ones on the half of the street.
The townhouses.
The townhouses and the larger L-shaped building, which is the senior one. Those are the ones that there will be seeking occupancy. As the calendar year progresses.
Okay,
And are you done?
I'm done.
Is the council, I asked this of Mark, is the council, I guess, monitoring the litigation that's going on in Portland on their homeless ordinance?
Good question. That has not directly come up during any of our meetings. I think Jacob said it best. We've been so busy with everything else, so we haven't really thought about it, but
I wonder if.
It's actually in the courts now.
yeah, I believe the Ninth Circuit decision. I would not be surprised if it gets picked up at the Supreme Court level, so this may all resolve entirely out of the modern world anyway.
My other question is an update on the, I guess, riverfront project. There's a lot of rumors, at least in the city, that a lot of stuff has been scrapped and is not moving forward.
Yeah, so we had a $3 million construction budget for the Riverwalk, which is along the river, stage, the playground, and the picnic shelter. So basically all the park improvements. We had 3 bids come in and they were all at $5 million. We did cost estimates throughout the project and we were like on track with that budget. Maybe it was a little over 3, but we were comfortable bidding it. So that was a shock. And inflation is really the only answer we got. There wasn't like any specific bid item that was astronomical or anything like that. So our grant funding is 1.3 mil. And we don't want to jeopardize that. And it is strictly for the Riverwalk. So we're going to move forward based on our funding source for the Riverwalk and defer the stage, the playground, and just sort of keep those portions of the park in place as much as we can.
how much was the stage again?
1 million.
1 million for the stage.
So, and that's an average of the 3 bids we received.
It's not much anymore in construction.
Yeah, so, it's an eye opener for sure where construction costs are at. So now we're just kind of working on that redesign effort. We still plan on having it bid in the new year. We still plan on having a time frame that's within the time frame of the development of downtown street project. Yeah.
Okay, leads me to another question. This, I know it's probably not within planning necessarily, But the intersection at First and St. Helens, was all dug up, then got paved. Again, rumors were that it's gonna have to all be dug up again. It was only paved to get us through Halloween Town.
Yeah, I can provide an update, but it is outside planning.
Right.
Public Works Director is managing and engineering is managing that, but, right now. The contractors who are doing the work told us that we needed to revisit the undergrounding design for utilities, that we didn't have enough detail in our initial plans. And so it's taken a lot of time to redesign the undergrounding because there are 4 or 5 communication providers and then also the PUD. I mean, if you look up, it's a really complicated aerial utility situation. And we don't want to concrete the entire intersection and then not have some of that undergrounding utility work done. And so we put a halt, we put an interim fix while the design for the undergrounding is finished. And then once that design is finished, we're gonna bid that out, see if it's within budget. I think it will be, and then bid that work before the rest of the intersection moves forward. Yeah.
And then I had one thing for the man on the end.
Yes, ma'am.
I tell myself I'm never going to another council meeting ever. But this summer I watched literally dozens of evergreens and trees die in every single park. And places where in the past, when we had a different crew, were irrigated and where sprinklers were turned on and things turned into dust bowls way earlier than any other place. And if you could take that information back to the people in charge of the parks, that they could be more mindful, because it's very frustrating. We put all this money into trails and all this money into this beautiful park, and we let the whole thing go to shit because we think we're gonna get a $5 million park. And then it's just this dusty, gross.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this year was a bad year anyway. I mean, I know my yard, I was out there.
I've never seen rhododendrons turn brown ever.
Yeah.
And then they didn't in my yard, but the city, that corner there on 18th is normally picturesque, awesome. And they ran sprinklers over by the library, but not out there at that corner. And I literally watched clematises and dogwoods and evergreens that come back year after year with nothing.
Well established.
Die. Yeah, it wasn't little grass that turns brown every year, but it was like, it was clearly someone dropped the ball. And it's like, you know, the amount of money we're spending on Parks and Rec and the amount of fees that are getting tacked onto water bills. We're paying for the water. Could you water some plants?
I will bring it up tomorrow.
Yeah, it's just like whatever you gotta do. And I know we lost the tree guy. But it's like there are people that you can contract to get, if they have to have an arborist, tell them water that one. But it's just frustrating because we have a lot of acreage of parks, and it's like just more than just the baseball fields get taken care of. It's just my pet peeve.
Jennifer, we skipped on the agenda, architectural standards. Did you have something to present?
I didn't, but I had a comment I'd like everybody to consider.
Okay.
And it's because I've been approached a couple times about proactive items, and I'm wondering if we approached it the correct way, because we did the House Bill 3115 because Toshki was passionate about it, and then you know, where I was passionate was I'd like to extend the historic district. That turned into architectural standards, but should we be listening to the citizens as to what they're thinking the proactive items should be somehow? And obviously it seems like we have a whole rebuild of the Planning Commission almost since we adopted or resolved that we were going to be a proactive Planning Commission. And I think we need to revisit everybody's enthusiasm on it and see where we kind of go from here. But one of the reasons I'm thinking that we do something different is because I keep hearing the, you know, decades long vacancies in downtown. What are we going to do about that? And that seems to be an item that citizens have approached me about of concern. And now we have properties that are the bank is for sale, Wild Currents building, they're vacating, and things are happening downtown. And maybe we need to reprioritize what we're doing. And how do we do that? What's the criteria? Instead of us just having our personal agendas, so to speak.
Aren't those proactive items though?
Yeah, well, we have to present. The only two proactive items that have been approved is the architectural standards and House Bill 3115. There hasn't been any other officially approved to work
Yeah,
on.
I think as long as the body discusses it and says, because it's your initiative. And if everybody agrees, yeah, we want to work on widgets. And as long as you can point to, yeah, this makes sense for a planning commission to do it. I know we adopted this formal process, but there's no reason it can't just be a discussion that everybody can.
Yeah, I would
point of
like-
it is it's extra,
Yeah.
so. Do what you wanna do.
Yeah.
Something that's meaningful, but.
Yeah, I guess I didn't realize it was this formal process. I thought it was
That
just
happened
the
before us.
ideas of.
That happened before us.
Yeah, and I don't see why it can't just, we wanna address widgets.
No, because I agree with Jennifer that, I mean, that's when people come up and talk to me, what they're talking about is the empty storefronts and property owners not.
Now, Amani Center's building a new building, so that's another,
Yeah, that's another vacancy in Holton.
that's a sizable vacancy that I always thought was not the right place for them.
Yeah.
That's a commercial space, and now you have the new buildings that Russ is building coming on.
Well,
he's getting closer.
So we've had clients look at the bank building. I would love to do it, obviously, but it's not the right time for me to do it. But we've had doctors look at it, and even though I have an obligation to show them the property, I'm thinking, oh, that would be terrible. I want it to be something that would bring people downtown and have a coffee shop or something instead of different uses. And I think it's it just seems to be coming to the forefront when I talk to people about planning commission. That's probably the most popular thing that they talk about is empty storefronts. So
Maybe it's a conversation to have with the Main Street Alliance,
Good idea.
because they seem to have some energy and some bandwidth and some desire, and it's a shared purpose.
yeah, that's a good idea.
You go from the old
Right,
town
they
district
cover-
all the way.
They cover the entire area, and I think that's the only complaint in all the years I've been involved, is there isn't a sweeping strategy that includes everybody. That talks about vacancies clear up by LTAP and vacancies clear down here by Jilly's. And so I think that putting all that together and putting our voice with it, they could tell us how we can help them.
Well, I'm wondering if the
They have,
conversation
at least
with our
they told
joint,
me. From the Main Street side is, they need to have something that they can use, something coming from planning commission, city council. That allows them to do something about these empty buildings where the owners are. Just told them.
Yeah, I know. I don't recall the details, but I know, for example, Astoria adopted some sort of carrot and stick approach to try to resolve that problem where if you use the space, you got something nice. If you didn't use the space, there was some sort of penalty.
yeah.
And we kind of talked about that one time before, and that was kind of the whole, we're gonna do both, really.
Yeah.
Cause one of them's not gonna, the carrot's not gonna do it by itself.
Yep. And maybe it's a discussion for the joint meeting to see how we might approach it.
That's a good idea.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, so we can add that to the joint meeting fodder.
Okay. That's all I had on it. I've just been thinking about it a lot. I feel like I've dragged my feet but we haven't had a whole commission full and, capacity, obviously, but, so.
We had a series of vacancies that didn't help.
Yeah, so.
Now,
All right, that's all I had.
I will say, we are on the verge of some lean budget years. And how that's gonna affect staffing. Honestly, I'm gonna be surprised if we don't see layoffs in the next 1 or 2 years. I don't know how it's gonna be avoided. Now, I'm not on the budget committee. I've just been here a long time, including during the Great Recession, when we really felt it and had layoffs. And so that's gonna affect a lot of things.
Yeah, I would encourage any time there's a budget update on the city council agenda, if you're interested, watch and see that, because or just watch the recording, because it could have impacts on any proactive items, for sure.
Yeah.
It's a revenue idea.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking it.
Yeah. On that note.
Are we adjourned? It's late here.